Welcome to Jewels of the Trade. There are two gemstones gemologically considered jade in the USA: Jadeite jade and Nephrite jade. While the most valuable color of Nephrite jade is white, not all white Nephrite jade is valuable. White Nephrite jade has a wide range of value from under $100 to hundreds of thousands of dollars, whereas white Jadeite jade ranges from under $100 up into the low thousands when it comes to jewelry. In this video, we'll be looking at both, but if you want to jump ahead to something specific, I refer you to the timestamps in the video description. Before we dive in, I do want to clarify that in this video, we'll be discussing white jade jewelry specifically. Jade can be categorized into three main categories or industries: antiques and antiquities, art and carvings, and gemstones for jewelry. In each category, jade is valued differently. With that being said, an expert on jade jewelry is not an expert on jade antiques, and an expert in jade as a modern art form is not an expert in jade jewelry, and so on and so forth. This is Jewels of the Trade, so my videos are pretty much all about gemstones for use in jewelry, but I do show some jade art on this channel, and make sure you're subscribed because I will be dropping some videos soon that cover antique jade statuary. White jadeite jade is characterized as jadeite jade that is opaque and colorless. White tends to be of the more affordable jadeite jade colors, but has a wide range of value depending on quality. Low quality white jades with drier texture and larger crystal sizes tend to be very affordable due to their inferior durability and appearance. The strand on screen here is fine quality white jadeite jade, as evidenced by its glassy, uniform texture. As is usually the case with jadeite jade, increased translucency generally correlates to increased desirability. When colorless jadeite jade is translucent, it's called ice jade, not white jade. Translucency in jadeite jade, a polycrystalline aggregate, results from a compact microstructure of extremely small crystals with little space between them. Imagine you have a bunch of medium to large rocks in a jar. There's going to be space between the rocks and therefore instability and weakness. Now imagine a jar full of sand. Sand, due to its small grain size, has less space between each grain. Because of this microstructure, translucent jade is known to be tougher, meaning harder to break, than opaque jade. Translucent jadeite jade can be up to 24 times harder to break than a diamond, making ice jade and all translucent jades one of the toughest gemstones in the world. Ice jadeite jade is more valuable than white jadeite jade, being the third preferred color of jadeite jade behind green and lavender. These strands are both ice jade. Which one do you think is more valuable? The strand on the left is 31 inches long and the beads are 6.6 millimeter, whereas the strand on the right is 33 inches long and the beads are 3.5 to 6 millimeter. On both strands, the beads are well matched, but this is still a natural material, and finding a perfectly matched strand is extremely difficult, if not impossible. As a rule, the better matched a strand of jade, the more valuable. There is some nuanced variation in color in both of these strands, though you might not be able to tell on camera. While the chat debates which of these strands is more valuable, I'll answer a question: when did jadeite jade first start being treated? This is a question that I've been asked quite a bit recently, so I did want to talk about it. Nephrite jade in jewelry is not typically treated, but you will see jadeite jade that's been treated a lot, and the problem is that it's typically posing as natural jade. Now, the reason this is such an issue is because the value of treated jade is significantly less. In the case of polymer impregnated jades, treated jade, or B jade, is going to be about 5% the value of its natural jade counterpart. And in the case of dyed jadeite jade, which would be considered C jade, or when combined with polymer impregnation, B plus C jade, then the jade is like extremely unvaluable, like sometimes only as little as 20 or 30 or 40 or $50 compared to a similar strand that would be natural that might be in the thousands or tens of thousands. This treatment is extremely prevalent, and I think a lot of customers, or maybe even people who've inherited jade, wonder if it's even possible that their jade could be treated, because maybe it's an older piece. So they ask pretty frequently about like the technology and when it came about. I do want to say it doesn't take super sophisticated technology necessarily to just dye jadeite jade. So let's say you have like a really like opaque and pale jadeite jade that has really large crystal sizes and it's very dry. It might actually soak up a dye pretty easily. And in fact, they've even found cases where like dyed lavender jade was actually colored with the use of blueberry juice. So that is to say, there's not necessarily like an age of jade that you could completely eliminate the possibility of dye. However, it wasn't super common before the 1980s. And with that, I should mention that the jade trade wasn't as big as it is now before the 1980s either, because China was closed off from the world economy for some time under Mao's rule. So you do kind of have this like gap where you see some jade in Art Deco and you see some jade in retro jewelry and maybe a little bit of mid century, but you don't see a lot of jadeite jade on the market until after Mao's death and the rise of Deng Xiaoping in the 70s, leading into like kind of the economic boom of jade in the 80s, which influenced styles in America in the 90s. So, with that being said, it, you might not have jade that's older than the 1980s anyways. It might be a little less common. As for polymer impregnation, that technology we believe was developed sometime in the 1980s. So, if you can be certain that your jade is older than that, it is probably less likely that it's been impregnated with polymer. Okay, what did we think about the strand of ice jade beads? Do you guys have an opinion on which one is more valuable? Welcome, Nails Jamie B. So glad to have you. If you guys have any questions about jade, please leave them in the chat. It's time for the reveal. So, the strand on the left is more valuable because of bead size. As a rule, it is harder to get larger beads out of high quality material because there is less of it in the boulder. A jade boulder will have a mix of colors and qualities in it. It might have internal fractures from its metamorphic formation. So, obviously, finding a single cab of good quality is going to be easier than finding a whole strand of matched beads in the same quality or even finding a bangle in the same quality out of the boulder. As a rule, it is harder to get larger beads out of high quality material because there's less of it. And so finding a matched strand of ice jade beads is pretty rare to begin with, and the value increases substantially with size due to its rarity. Let's go ahead and move on to this carving. And if you guys have any questions about jade, please leave them in the chat. Or if you're watching this after the fact, be sure to let me know in the comments. So this carving here has a glassy luster and a good glow to it from its translucency. This is natural jadeite jade from Mason K. It's a thick carving and it's not completely see-through. This isn't totally opaque white jade, but it's also not quite ice jade. So we call this icy white jadeite jade. Icy white jades are a neutral hue, great for everyday wear, and they tend to be an affordable alternative to icy green jades, and especially icy lavender and icy red, which is extremely rare. So I almost never see icy red that's true red. I have seen a strand of beads, which we'll probably be showing next week, of icy red beads that are they're a very like red orange, like it's getting close to true red, and they are very fine and they are very translucent and they're spectacular. So be sure that you've subscribed so that you can see those when they premiere either next week or the week after. So this is an example of what we call icy green jade. It's icy and can even be seen through in some parts. You can kind of see the translucency where you can see my finger through the stone, but it's not colorless. It has a pale green hue. Many customers prioritize translucency over color in jadeite jade. Which of these icy carvings do you think is more valuable? The icy green carving is smaller and thinner than the icy white carving, but it has more translucency and it's still technically green, the most valued color in jadeite jade. While the chat discusses which of the carvings is more valuable, I'll answer a question I've gotten a lot recently, which is, what is the meaning of jade grades? I love this question because the nomenclature in our industry is so confusing. Typically, in regards to gemstones, when people say grade, they're referring to the quality of it. However, when talking about jadeite jade, that's not usually the case because treatment codes, for some reason, are also referred to as grades. So we like to say, by we, I mean like me and my husband and my friends at Mason K, like we like to say type A or A jade when referring to natural untreated jadeite jade. But some people will say grade A, and that's not incorrect. However, it might give the impression that that refers to a quality as opposed to a treatment, which, of course, it's a treatment code. The treatment codes are A for natural, B for polymer impregnated, C for dyed, and B plus C when it's polymer impregnated and dyed. So, to clarify the meaning of jade grades, people who say it are probably meaning treatment code. But if they're referring to quality, like a quality grade, it's important to clarify that, especially in the nephrite jade world, individual companies are going to have internal grading systems that they use to communicate the quality of their product to their shoppers. This is not a universal grading system, as there is not a universal grading system that exists for colored stones or especially jade. So when it comes to nephrite, you might hear someone say, oh, this is a nephrite or a jade or double A or triple A, and they might refer to that as a grade. People use different nomenclature and terminology, but just so you know, when people are talking about nephrite and they're talking about grades, they're probably referring to quality, probably. But when people talk about jadeite jade and they use the term grades, it's more likely that they're referring to treatment. So if you're shopping from a seller who's using this term, I would advise you to ask for further clarification on what they might mean. Let's take a look at the chat. Norman says the icy green is gorgeous. It is. It is so gorgeous. And it actually looks a lot better in person. There's something about jade when it looks like wet, like when it has that kind of like luster to it where you like kind of like you kind of want to like dry it off even though it's not actually wet. That's actually a really good sign. That's a good sign of the internal structure, of the translucency, and that's actually something that this piece has. Like it almost like it kind of looks like it has water on it even though it actually doesn't. Illuminati Cartel says, this is so informative. Thank you. You're very welcome. Norman says, I will say the icy white is more valuable due to size and consistency. So let's go ahead and reveal which of these two, hold on. Let's go ahead and reveal which of these two is more valuable. So the icy green carving is more expensive because it's icier and greener, but they are both valuable and beautiful carvings. Jade is not priced per carat because of beads, carvings, and bangles. And this is like a really good demonstration of why jade isn't priced per carat. If we go back, you can really see like the price difference, but obviously there's a significant difference in, I would say, quality, and it is true that it is a difference in quality, but it's really a difference in market desirability, in that because the market places higher value on the icy green, that makes it more valuable, and therefore, like if you were to price this jade per carat, it would be imbalanced. Like it wouldn't properly reflect like market demands. So while size is a contributing factor for value, it doesn't take precedence over translucency and color. This carving is not expensive. It's actually quite affordable, but it's by no means low quality. It's not dry, it doesn't have large crystal faces, and even though it's not icy, aka translucent, it does have a glassy luster. And I do want to take a moment just to kind of mention, I talk about like low quality jade a lot, and then I usually don't show examples of it. And I just want to apologize because I don't have a lot of examples of like the lower, like the really low commercial quality jadeite jade that I'm referring to. And I have kind of explained in previous videos that when I say the low quality jade, I'm typically talking about like the really dry jade that has large crystal sizes. And the reason that I don't have examples of that is Mason K helps me so much by sending these pieces for me to show on my channel for educational purposes. And they don't stock they don't stock like the quality of jade that's not going to be durable because they don't want to sell a product that's going to like break and make someone sad and they're going to have to send it back and it's like a whole thing. So they're very very careful, like they always like check the jades that they buy for inventory very very closely to make sure there's not like internal fractures and that it's not like a really like what I call crumbly jade, meaning that it's going to break more easily. So I hope that makes sense, and I do apologize I don't have a lot of examples of low quality jade, but if you like start browsing the internet, you're gonna find it. You're gonna see what I mean. I promise. So this is not ice jade. It is white jadeite jade, and it's less than $500. It's a large size and it's hand carved. And in photos, it might look like Qinghai nephrite. So let's talk about that. In ancient China, the jade was revered throughout multiple dynasties, prized by emperors as the finest material on earth. It was said that all stones wanted to be jade. But what many people don't realize is that much of the prized jade of ancient China was white jade, not green. In fact, I've even heard that the Chinese invented porcelain to mimic jade. In the grand scheme of jade, the highest valued jades are green and lavender jadeite jades and white nephrite jade antiquities. Fine white nephrite modern carvings can tie with fine jadeite jade beads and bangles, but I can't overemphasize that not all white nephrite jade is valuable, just as not all green jadeite jade is valuable. Chinese culture today still celebrates white jade, and some white nephrite carvings sell for over 100,000 US dollars. Fine, white nephrite jades are often purchased before they even get the chance to make it to the American market, so little is known about it in the West. The finest quality of white nephrite jade is called mutton fat, but mutton fat does not refer to all white nephrite jade. It's kind of like when we use the term imperial in reference to jadeite jade. So if we say like imperial green jadeite jade, that's like the highest echelon of quality for green jadeite jade. So typically most like imperial jadeite jade pieces are going to be like probably over $50,000. And that's not a rule, but just to kind of give you an idea of like the correlation between that term and quality, mutton fat is a lot like that. Mutton fat refers to like the upper echelon, like the highest quality of white jadeite or white nephrite jade. Sorry, white nephrite jade. So before I give an overview on white jade origins, I just want to say that I'm not actually an expert on nephrite jade. So if you are, please share your wisdom in the chat or in the comments. The value of Chinese and Russian white jades actually depends largely on origin, with the main sources of white nephrite being these. So you have Xinjiang, which is in China. It's the source of what is called Hotan, Khotan, or Hotan, or Hetian, spelled Hetian jade, the finest white jade in the world. Hetian jade can refer to river cobbles from the Urangash River or the White Jade River, or even from the mountains nearby. So the term Hetian jade can encompass sort of a large category of things. Be warned, it is very confusing because Hetian jade can also refer technically to any nephrite jade. And that basically goes back to an emperor who sort of like amended the law in China to say that you could call any nephrite Hetian jade. So some people do, and it's not technically wrong, I guess. And it can also, some people use that term just to refer to white nephrite jade. So if you want true Hetian jade from Xinjiang, you need to ask the seller about origin. Siberian jade is considered by some to be a close second to Hetian jade. And then some people consider it like tied, like it's like equal when it's really high quality with the best of Hetian jades. So Siberian jade has a range of qualities, some of which does reach the US market, but I've personally never even seen like the finest quality of Siberian white nephrite. Siberian white nephrite has a reputation for being dry, but again, there's a range of quality. So hey chat, just curious, am I having some issues with my video? And follow-up question, did it just improve? So sorry if we've been having technical difficulties and I haven't noticed. I'm going to check the chat to see if you guys were trying to warn me. Yeah, oh, Mason K brings up, Hey, Mason K. So glad to have you here. Mason K brings up a fantastic point. So we're going to come back and talk about the origins of white jade, but this is so important. So the concept of like BC jade, that is so confusing because in Nephrite, when somebody says BC jade, they're actually referring to Nephrite jade from British Columbia, BC for British Columbia in Canada. In Jadeite jade, we use the term B plus C jade, which refers to treated Jadeite jade that has been acid bleached, polymer impregnated, polymer wax or resin impregnated, and dyed. So it's not, it's very confusing. And that's why I try to say Canadian jade instead of BC jade, just to kind of like try not to confuse the internet. Ooh, great question. Is burnt color considered treated? Mason K, you're here in the chat. Would you like to weigh in on this? So, talking about like kind of a burnt look in treated jade. In some red jades, it's going to have this like dry, dark, burnt color. And it it's a bit nuanced. So I'm not sure how to like explain it, especially without demonstrating it. But a jade expert or like a jade expert like Jeff Mason, graduate gemologist at Mason K, or somebody who does that sort of thing for a living, a gemologist usually, will probably be able to tell whether the jade is just dry or if it's actually heated, which is a type of treatment to modify the color. So that's a great question. Yes, sometimes, but not always. I think it just kind of depends on like specifically what you're asking about. Somebody said, "What is burnt color?" So I've only seen the burnt color in red jades, which when we say red jade, we're usually referring to jadeite jades that are a range from orange to red to brown. Because true red, like true red on the color wheel in jadeite jade is like crazy rare. So you'll sometimes see you'll usually see orange or brown, and we call that red jade a lot of times. Unless it's like really brown, then we call it brown jade. But if it's like dry, like if it's if it looks burnt, it might have been heated. So that's actually what this person's referring to. Mason K, we don't consider it treated, just heated, and therefore of lower value. So I hope that clarifies. And then Jackie wants to know, is Burmese redite, is Burmese red jadeite jade real? Yes, it is real. So jade actually can come in a variety of colors, but typically, like, let's say you mine a jadeite jade boulder and you slice it and you look at it, you'll see like your green, white, and lavenders in the middle. And then the closer you get to like the rind of the boulder, you're going to see like this gradient from like yellow to orange to red or yellow to orange to brown. And that's where it's like oxidized. So that's considered a secondary coloration, where it's not a different chemistry necessarily from formation. It's that the exposure to air or exposure to like oxygen after the formation has caused it to change color. And I'm not a geologist, so if somebody has a more refined way of explaining that, I would love to hear it. You're please welcome to leave it in the chat or in the comments, of course. Mason K also wanted me to mention that Mason K does try to stay away from heated jade when possible. Sometimes a customer might have a very specific like request for it, but for the most part, it's not something that you're going to see on the Mason K website or from a Mason K retail partner. So I hope that provides some clarification. Getting back to the sources of white nephrite jade, let's talk about Qinghai. And I love these pieces. I'm actually wearing, so the pendant that I'm wearing is the one in the video, and then these are Siberian earrings, and then my husband cut this bangle. It's got a major fracture going through it, but this is a Siberian white jade bangle. But my friend Dake actually sent me these pieces, and they're just such a fantastic demonstration of what we're talking about. So this is Qinghai jade or Qinghai nephrite, considered one of the more prevalent and affordable white jades on the Chinese market. You can purchase Qinghai white jade for like under $100 sometimes. It has a reputation for being glassy, which you can see more in the example on the right. I personally love it, and I think it's totally underrated. And then there's also Korean. So this is a video that I took at the Monterey Bay Jade Festival, which that video has dropped, by the way. If you guys have been waiting to see the Monterey Bay 2024 video, it dropped a few days ago. Korean is another of the more common white jades seen on the Chinese market. It has a reputation for being waxy. So this isn't a great demonstration because this is a rough slab, but I just didn't have an example of a finished piece, but it does. It looks waxier. Like there's something about the texture that's noticeably different. Korean nephrite is something I'm hoping to acquire for my collection. I was very excited to see a little bit of rough. This was, I think, the only piece I found. Not that I was necessarily looking specifically for it, at the Monterey Bay Jade Festival a couple of weeks ago from Lockie Kellogg at Primarily Jade. And I believe Jade West sells some Korean white rough as well. Korean jade, like Qinghai, might be sold for an unfairly high price, posing as Hetian jade. So just kind of something to keep out for. The texture is a pretty good giveaway for something like that. And then just to clarify, there is a simulant. Is it chrysoprase? Does anybody in the chat know? There's a simulant that's called Korean jade, and it's not jade. It is something else, and it's often marketed as Korean jade, and it makes it very confusing because Korean jade is in fact real. There is nephrite from Korea, and in fact, there's, from what I understand, like quite a bit of it on the Chinese market, though we see a lot less of it here on the American market. Let's see what the chat has to say. Welcome, Raphael. Raphael is from Guatemala. Lucky to get Jade, a jewelry maker and lapidary. We're glad to have you. Welcome to the chat. Excellent, excellent. So now let's compare. Hold on. Where's my little video? Here it is. These. Okay. This is an example of white jadeite jade on the left next to white Qinghai nephrite jade on the right. Ignore the color difference. Notice the similarity in luster. So it's always good to shop from a seller who knows what they're selling, because there's a pretty significant difference between these two. Of course, one's a cab, one's a carving, so it doesn't really, I mean, there's not like, it's one of those things where it would matter more if you had two really similar pieces, and one was being sold for higher than it should, or one was being, I guess not as much if one was being sold for lower than it should. But regardless, you want to shop from a seller who knows what they're selling and knows the difference between jadeite and nephrite. So there's definitely a similarity in luster here with that glassiness. Now these are both jadeite jade, but the carving on the right has a glassier luster, whereas the carving on the left has a comparatively greasier texture. So when we say jadeite is primarily glassy, secondarily greasy, and nephrite is the inverse, meaning primarily greasy, secondarily glassy. And yes, we do say that. In case you're like, Jordan, what are you talking about? It's something that GIA teaches us when we're in gemology school. And if you go to the GIA website, they have like these little charts and stuff. And I mean, you can get them; they're on the internet. But they'll have like luster, and like when you look it up, like it'll say jadeite, glassy, comma, greasy, and then you look up nephrite, it's like greasy, comma, glassy. So that's actually, if you're like, what are you talking about? That's what I'm talking about. So anyways, you'll occasionally see both lusters in both jades. That's probably not helpful information. And yes, it does make gem identification more confusing, but you don't really have to worry about it because you can always just send your jade to Mason K for testing, or just buy it from a trustworthy seller in the first place, and then you know what you're getting. So anyways, the point is that sometimes nephrite can be glassy, sometimes jadeite can be greasy. It's all very confusing, and the rules are important, but for gem identification at home, the rules are kind of guidelines. So don't be too strict about it. It's like hardness. It's not what it seems. So as we wrap up on this presentation, let's take a quick look at moss in snow jadeite jade. Moss in snow is characterized by a white jadeite jade body color with a touch of bright apple green. So this is a buckle. So it's a carving. It's not meant to be in jewelry. It's like a piece of art. And it is from Mason K. And so the pieces, they hook together and they kind of come apart. I suppose they could be in jewelry. I'm just not really sure how. You'd have to kind of like mount them both probably. But yeah, they're two little, I believe, dragons with that little hint of green. So pretty. So gorgeous. Ooh, Brendan, what about California jade? Is there jade in California? There absolutely is. And I I have some examples now, and I'm really excited to show you guys. So, I picked up some really cool things in Monterey, and I was even gifted some really, really cool jades while I was there. And those are some pieces that I will be showing in a live video, not today's, but pretty soon. I'll show you some examples of my California jadeite jade. So, and in fact, I can show you side by side California Nephrite jade and California Jadeite jade because I have both now. So my collection is growing. It's very exciting. So as far as California jade goes, the most famous is Big Sur, which is nephrite that is found alluvially, usually in the ocean, like in the Pacific Ocean. And it's not a major trade because it's not being like commercially mined or anything like that. So you'll see it, but you won't see it usually in jewelry stores. You won't see a lot of it. And then the jadeite jade from California, I feel like is even harder to come by. So I actually showed an example in the Monterey Bay Jade Festival video that I dropped a few days ago. I showed an example of a bangle. Oh, a bangle of California jadeite jade from Ryan Spangler. I was like, I've never seen a California jadeite jade bangle, so it was really significant. So for you, Brendan, I highly recommend checking out that video on the 2024 Monterey Bay Jade Festival because it will show exactly what you're asking about. And then, what makes jade waxy or greasy? So as far as like from the geological side, I have no idea. But from like the gemology identification side, I can say that like if um if a nephrite jade, especially like a white nephrite jade, has like more of a texture than another, like more of a waxy texture, more of a greasy texture comparatively, that can be a really good identification tool. So origin or locale might be like the easiest answer to your question. The origin or the locale is what determines kind of the surface luster of the white nephrite jade. I hope that's helpful. It's probably not as complete of an answer as you were looking for. Keen Owl says, is jade easily broken? Is there extra care needed? So no, jade is not easily broken, and that is the absolute true answer. But caveat, you cannot throw it at a brick wall. You cannot like smash it on a concrete floor. So jade, both nephrite jade and jadeite jade, is like, it's two of the toughest gemstones in the world, with nephrite jade being up to 48 times harder to break than a diamond and jadeite jade being up to 24 times harder to break than a diamond. So yes, they are tough. They are not easily broken. However, they're still gemstones, right? So they have to be handled with care. As far as extra care, I would not say that they need more care than other jewelry. All jewelry should be like well cared for, with the exception of jade pieces usually shouldn't be put in an ultrasonic. There's two main reasons for that. Number one, a lot of jadeite jade has a thin coating of beeswax on the top. This is not considered a treatment because one, it's not permanent. It does come off. And two, it does not affect the value at all. So according to FTC guidelines, it's not considered a treatment. That beeswax coating, which protects it, right? Because basically, like jade it's a polycrystalline aggregate, meaning it's a rock. So it can be kind of porous. And if you were to like soak it in something, that something might like get into the jade. The beeswax coating sort of protects that from happening. That way you can interact with materials and not worry about it like getting into your jade. So you don't want to put it in the ultrasonic because you don't want to remove the beeswax coating. And you don't want to put it in the ultrasonic because jade stones are often cut as cabochons. Cabochons are usually glued into jewelry, and moisture of any kind, so in the hot tub, in the shower, in the ultrasonic, can soften the glue that holds that stone in, and you could potentially accidentally lose your stone if you're not paying attention. So that is the extra care that's needed. But I would say you don't have to be more careful of jade than you would a diamond or like a garnet or a sapphire. And people are going to say, oh, but Jordan, the hardness of diamond, yada yada. Okay, here's the thing about diamonds. Yes, diamonds are the hardest natural mineral that's actually from earth and not from a meteorite, blah blah blah. But a diamond can still scratch another diamond, which means that with all diamond jewelry, you have to take care to put it into like little baggies and separate it from other jewelry because diamonds can scratch each other. And that is universally true of all jewelry. You don't just want to throw all of your jewelry into a bag because they can scratch each other. You don't want to like rub them up against each other because they can scratch each other. So take care of all your jewelry, no matter what's in it. Don't throw it at a brick wall. Never get in the hot tub with it because chlorine eats gold. And don't wrestle bears. in your jewelry. Very important. Is jade tougher than diamonds? Yes. The exception would be lower quality jades. So a more opaque, dry, larger crystal size jade is not going to be as tough as a diamond. A more translucent jade, a higher value jade, a more expensive jade is going to be significantly tougher than a diamond. There's a range. There's a range. So always be careful. And if you're buying a piece of jade that's very inexpensive, be more careful than you would normally be. So, all right, everybody. I think I had one more piece to show. This Lingzi mushroom carving is also moss in snow, white body color, green accent. Thank you for tuning into another live with Jewels of the Trade. I will be back next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. My previous live video on the history of jade had poor connectivity. Like I was having all kinds of like technical problems. So that video has been removed and I'll be re-presenting that content at a later date. So make sure that you're subscribed, stay tuned, and I will see y'all next time. Bye, everybody.